So when you get hit with a list of 13 demands from migrant organizations on the outside looking into other communities and other mayors that are not calling themselves quote unquote sanctuary cities, this can look like a big issue, like kind of like if you give a little bit of an inch, then people take a mile. And so it's going to definitely draw controversy all around.
We've got a list of demands. So you've got about 100 of these migrants, the newcomers. They put out a list to the mayor of 13 demands they've got to get if they wanted the city to get them out of there. And you know what? Apparently they're caving because 100 left.
Despite what the bleeding hearts of America want to claim, we have a bit of a problem with immigration. If you've known anyone going through the actual immigration process, then you know how cumbersome it can be for even the best candidates, sometimes taking thousands of dollars and years to complete. Here in Texas, scores of South American immigrants pour into El Paso on a weekly basis with no end in sight. I don't blame anyone for wanting a better life, but that want doesn't magically grant you access to whatever you set your eyes on. It also doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that allowing tons of people into an area with little to no means of obtaining income is a recipe for disaster. Yet, despite all logic, these sanctuary cities persist in their idealistic goals of harboring any random person at the expense of local taxpayers. Places like New York and Chicago are slowly realizing just how bad of an idea this is for the long term.
Demonstrators in New York City's Staten Island neighborhood are celebrating the blocking of a proposed migrant shelter in their neighborhood.
I think even people who are open-minded to what they call migrants coming in have understood now it's costing us.
Having accommodated over 100,000 recent migrants, New York City Mayor Eric Adams has warned that this may have grave implications for the city.
And how dare anyone say New York City is not going through a crisis? And here's the sad part about it, folks. When you get 10,000 a month, there's no relief in sight. And so I'm not going to search through a thesaurus and find the proper way to be politically correct to tell you that this can destroy our city, this crisis.
Tonight's meeting was packed with many people not happy about the city's decision to go ahead and open up a shelter for asylum seekers without their input at a vacant elementary school campus here on the south side of the city. Now tonight, the city presented many of the specifics for the plan itself, but that still seemed to offer little comfort to many.
I am, to say the least, freaking appalled at this fiasco.
That Woodlawn resident among hundreds who showed up to vent similar feelings about the city's plan to open up a refugee shelter at the vacant Wadsworth Elementary School campus.
I'm especially concerned about loitering as well as solicitation that may occur on the campus grounds.
One thing I've noticed about this whole ordeal is how the red herring of racism is now slowly fading away. Even some left-leaning politicians are reluctant to keep up the charade as their cities become over-encumbered with the consequences of their decisions. I want people to see just how easily the narrative has shifted now that Biden is in office rather than Trump. As our president allows for a free-for-all at the southern borders, his party now has to grapple with two things: satisfying the short-sighted bleeding hearts within his own constituency, but also balancing the real-world problems mass immigration causes for local border towns and sanctuary cities. The narrative years ago versus now has dramatically changed.
I voted for a fence. I voted unlike most Democrats, and some of you won't like it. I voted for 700-mile fence. And let me tell you something, folks. People are driving across that border with tons, hear me, tons of everything from byproducts from methamphetamine to cocaine to heroin. It's all coming up through corrupt Mexico.
And the impulse is to hunker down, shut the gates, build walls, exit at this moment is precisely the wrong answer.
And we have an economy now that is desperate for a labor force. You know, we have chaos at the border that I think Democrats are somehow afraid to address because they feel they might lose their seats if they do what the country needs, which is security at the border and a more thoughtful, humane policy.
But here in New Hampshire, just this week, Democrats complained about Republicans talking about the border. The chairman of the state party says that it's thinly veiled racism to talk about the border problem. And so in that climate, you're going to make border security part of your message to New Hampshire Democrats?
I'm going to make national security part of my platform because that is the fundamental responsibility of the American president.
But recently, Denver, Colorado's Mayor Mike Johnson has a surprise in the form of a list of demands from their migrant population that is encamped under a bridge near the Union Pacific Railways. Yes, the same people who came into the country illegally, set up camp wherever they wanted, and now refuse to leave to go to a facility where they'd be receiving stuff anyway, will not leave until their demands are met. You cannot make up this level of entitlement. How do you break into someone's home and then make demands before they remove you? But I want to take some time to read out each of these 13 demands just so you can see how bad some of these really are. Number 1, the migrants should be allowed to cook their own food with fresh, culturally appropriate ingredients, including rice, chicken, flour, tomatoes, and onions, instead of being served pre-made meals. They also want to ensure people are not punished for bringing and eating food from the outside of the shelters. 2, have access to showers at all times and without time limits. Number 3, visits by medical professionals will occur on a regular basis with referrals for specialty care made as needed. Number 4, the group will receive the same housing support offered to others, and city officials will not kick people out in 30 days without something established. Number 5, a clear and just process for removing someone, including verbal, written, and final warnings. Number 6, employment support, including work permit applications for those who are qualified. Number 7, free consultations with those with an immigration lawyer, as well as ongoing legal support provided by city through immigration clinics and transportation to court. Number 8, privacy for families in the shelter. Number 9, no physical or verbal or mental abuse by the shelter staff, and no 24/7 monitoring by law enforcement. No more sheriffs sleeping in the facility with them. Number 10, transportation for children to and from school. Number 11, no separation of families regardless of whether those families have children. 12, a meeting with the mayor and those involved in running the city's program to support migrants to discuss further improvements. And 13, all shelter residents will be provided with a document signed by a city official in English and Spanish and containing the list of demands and a number to call to report violations. Isn't that nice?
Let's talk about the asks, because we are seeing this list of demands from some migrants in the city. Were you surprised by this?
Yeah, some of them, it's just down to a humanitarian issue. Having access to food is something that people need. Not getting in verbal or physical altercations with staff is some other things on their list. Transportation for children to and from school is another thing on their list. But I'm actually surprised because I understand that Denver's mayor, Mike Johnson, like he talked about in our interview, has been doing more than a lot of mayors across the country to try to find ways to solve this, even pulling from things like the police budget, the fire department, our Department of Transportation. So when you get hit with a list of 13 demands from migrant organizations on the outside looking into other communities and other mayors that are not calling themselves quote unquote sanctuary cities, this can look like a big issue, like kind of like if you give a little bit of an inch, then people take a mile. And so it's going to definitely draw controversy all around.
We've been offering time and shelter, basically just trying to get families to leave that camp and come inside. What might be something that is a feasible path for you to success that is not staying on the streets of Denver. We try to compromise. We try to figure something out. You know, at the end of the day, what we do not want is families on the streets of Denver.
Denver Democrats have been trying to negotiate with the migrants. It's not going well. Look at the migrants' list of demands. Culturally appropriate food, unlimited shower time, free health care, free housing, work permits, free consultations with immigration lawyers, more privacy, an end to 24/7 monitoring, and free transportation. When I stay at my mom's house, I'm not even allowed unlimited shower time.
Denver swept one migrant camp this morning and swept a second after the migrants moved. Close to 100 people were staying at the first camp, located on private property in Central Park. When they moved, the city swept in again. 9 News reporter Angeline McCall has been following this all day for us. Angeline, some only accepted shelter after a compromise.
Yeah, it took a lot of bargaining for migrants to accept shelter. A lot of people didn't want that shelter option because they just felt like they couldn't get a guarantee from the city as to what would happen. And so many of them came to this second encampment that they set up sort of off of Pena Boulevard. And so you'll see behind me, this is what's left of the second encampment. This is where people came when they were originally swept from the initial location, which was in Central Park, sort of by the railroad. It was on railroad property, which is what prompted that city sweep. Now, people were really frustrated with the arrangement earlier this morning, to the point where one man who left his family in Venezuela to work here in the United States said that he was so at his wit's end that he wanted to take a bus ticket out of the city.
Okay, bye.
So I'd love to know why any sane person thinks that this scenario will help our society. Let me elaborate. How do you think things will turn out when you allow people to enter the country illegally, set up camp wherever they feel like it, then allow them to coerce you into demanding free room and board with culturally appropriate food, unlimited shower time, and zero police presence? Do you think they'll magically become productive members of society given what's already been established? We all know the answer, but only time will tell. I'm the Commentary King, and I'll see you around.